Welcome to my interview today with a lovely lady named Marcy Pusey. She is a multiple trauma survivor turned thriver, and she now is a trauma-informed story coach. And we'll get to that of what is that in our interview today. But she's also a Tedx speaker, a prolific writer. You just won't believe how many books that Marcy has. And for those of you who don't know me, I am Danielle Burnock from danielleburnock.com. Love yourself from Survive to Thrive, that lady on the internet who loves you. And I will bring in Marcy here so you can hear her story. It is really quite amazing.
Hello, hello.
Welcome, Marcy. Thank you so much for being with me today on my program. Thank you for sharing your story, making yourself vulnerable, and just thank you. I'm really excited about what you have to share today.
Me too. And like I said, thanks for having me. I never take it lightly when someone entrusts me with their audience. That's a big sacred space. And so I appreciate that you've entrusted me with that today. So thanks.
Oh, yes, definitely. Well, let's start with, what was it like growing up as Marcy Pusey? Or was your name Pusey as a kid, or did you go back to your, oh yeah, well, I kind of digressed there a little bit. So just Marcy, what was it growing up, Marcy? What was it growing up like?
Yeah. So as Marcy Walters, I was born in Southern California. My dad was in the military, so I was actually born on a military base. And to young parents who'd really had a rough start themselves and were still just trying to figure out life. So I'm the firstborn into a family situation that has, like most parents, like now that I'm a parent, I'm like, oh man, I haven't figured out life yet. How am I going to raise these people? So looking back, I'm like, oh, 100% that was my parents, right? They were just trying to get their own feet under them and navigate all their own early trauma and ongoing trauma, and being born into that. I very quickly understood some things about life. They didn't have to tell me anything directly, right? Like children have the natural survival skills. We're all wired with survival skills, but from early on, we're going, okay, how do I live in this new environment as a child who needs all the things still from parents? And so what I sort of understood from that environment was that sort of the less of a burden that I could be, the more value I had, sort of the quieter and the more I could contribute, the more value I had. So it was, again, nobody ever told me that. It was just from watching and experiencing my parents try to navigate their own lives and somewhere picking up like, oh, they've got enough on their plate. They don't need me to be hard too. And so in that time, there were a few years where my mom was a single mom. My parents were separated, couldn't afford a divorce. So that's sort of what kept them together in that way.
Wow.
So in poverty, my mom is a single stay-at-home mom trying to pay for us right after my sister was born. So she's almost 5 years younger than me. And I remember all the fights while my mom was pregnant and the trips to the hotel to separate for a bit. And so even in that, like there was like, oh yeah, now I need to be even less of a burden. So if I were at the Boys and Girls Club or some after school program and they gave away food, I would bring all that food home. Like, no, I'm going to add, all through high school, I worked in the school cafeteria so that I could get free lunches. Like constantly, it was just part of my,
wow.
Yeah, my growing.
I don't think all children are like that. Some of them, they act out the opposite way.
It's true.
Because they're not getting their needs met, and you adapted in a completely different way.
Absolutely. Wow. I mean, independence, right? It was almost like, oh, the sooner I can be self-reliant and self-independent, then the more value I have. Like I really did from so young assign my worth and value to how much I could keep people happy or at least neutral and not contribute in any way to any kind of hardship, which is a load to carry, and I think my parents would be mortified to hear that was how my little brain interpreted my life and how I just handled it as a little kid. They would never want that for their daughter. But the reality is that's just how my survival instincts kicked in. Be independent, be self-reliant, don't need them, but give to them. Just give, be a giver from too young, right? So
that's a lot of pressure for a little kid. Are your parents still alive? You said
they are still alive. Yeah, they are still alive. Yeah, they're they're not on the internet very much.
And there you go.
Yeah, they're trying to figure out, like, they were forced to upgrade from flip phones. Well, no, my dad has like the one last flip phone in existence that still can have service. And my mom had to go to a touch phone, and I'm getting regular calls for help. Like, what is an icon? I'm having to go back to the basics. So yeah, all that to say, that's I'm still
You're still
parenting
playing
technology.
that role.
Exactly. Now, at this point it makes sense in life, but yeah. So, and then I lived out of the country for a number of years, which I know will come up in a bit. And so now that I'm back, it's it's a nice opportunity to be close in proximity again, especially as they're getting older, and to help them navigate technology.
Yes. When you were growing up, did you have any kind of faith in your home or anything like that?
Yeah, so my mom was very good about trying to integrate faith practices and disciplines into my upbringing. So there were times where we were in church, there were times where we weren't, but she still had this ongoing practice of scripture memorization, and has a gift of discernment herself. And so she just had a lot of really cool stories of experiencing angelic forces, demonic forces. And so I kind of grew up with like that being normal. But when they married, my dad was not a believer. He came to faith later. So there was an element I didn't know as a baby, where there were some faith dynamics there. But I always knew there was a God, even before I knew his name or what to call it. I remember being in, it was like kindergarten, and some little kid was walking around asking everyone, like, are you a Christian? Are you a Christian? I had no idea what it meant. So I was trying to like feel out what the general answer was so I could blend in. And so I was like, yeah, I'm a Christian. And then I remember I'm in kindergarten. I have this memory from kindergarten, like asking a kid, what's a Christian? Oh, someone who believes in God. I was like, oh, phew. Oh, good. I didn't lie. So I always had this.
Oh, that's so 5-year-old of you.
I know. It's also so 41-year-old.
Yes.
If I were in a room, I would probably do the same thing today. Not with the word Christian, now I know, but other words, I'd be like, yeah. What is that? Oh my gosh. So, and I would say that like God had such a hold of my heart and awareness from so young that even as my parents were sort of like, I don't want to say wrestling with their faith experience, but certainly like the demonstration of it, or how to practice it, or whatever. Like I just had this anchor. I just had this anchor. I always knew that I wasn't alone and that he was there. And later in life, that became kind of extravagant for my family. I remember them having some concern. They called me a Jesus freak. And I actually was like really flattered by that, because DC Talk sang a really great song about Jesus freak.
I know that song.
Score! I'm a Jesus freak. But that was not a good thing for them, right? So there was also this kind of status quo of faith that you stay in, and you don't get so excited about it like I might. Like I always loved missions, and I was always involved with my church in different ways. And that was just a bit much for them at times in their life. So yeah, I did have that faith experience. I'll give you one quick story. I want to be mindful of our time, but this was
well, is that after we get into after you're married and everything?
No, it's just a faith experience. Yeah. So I was like 5 or 6. My parents were separated. We were living in an apartment complex, and a church came door to door knocking, saying, hey, if you want to ride to church, we have a bus that comes through. We'll take you to church. And I was so excited to get to go to church. So that following Sunday, I was up and ready, and they knocked on the doors to say the bus is here, but my mom was in the bathroom and she wasn't ready. And so I just went ahead and got on the bus, and I went to church, and she didn't make it to the bus. So her little 5 or 6-year-old gone on a bus with people she didn't know. And I had a great time. I had a really great time. And then I came back, and my mom was livid, like, where did you go? You don't get on the bus without me. And I was like, you weren't ready.
Very 5-year-old too. That's very 5-year-old.
that next Sunday, she was ready. She was ready on time. And we got on that bus together. And then we sat down in a seat. And then I don't know, also 5 or 6-year-old, I was like, I don't want to sit in this seat. Let's sit over there. So I made us move seats, not knowing that morning they did a raffle for a free trip to Disneyland. And they pulled a number out of the hat, counted all the seats, and landed right on us. So then we immediately got like really involved with the church, because then we went on a church Disneyland trip for free with other members of the community because they picked us up and moved seats. The end. That's my story.
Wow. Wow. That one question led to that. We would have never heard that. I was like, because I know between, I know that faith is a part of your story later. So I wanted to, pull it from the beginning too. And but from your childhood until you got married, what led into your marriage, and how old were you when you got married?
Yeah. So I was 23 when we got married, I was 23 when we got married. I think we met when I was 20 or 20. No, it wasn't even that long. 20 or 21. I think we met, almost 21. I lived in South America for a year for our engagement. So some of why it seems like there was a long time.
Why were you in South America for your engagement?
I was on a mission trip. Yeah. So
I met him on the mission trip?
I met him just before I left. And then I signed up for a year-long discipleship training through a mission program. And so I lived in Guatemala, Paraguay, and Canada for the year of our engagement. So we would have probably been married faster, but I wasn't on the continent.
You did like the opposite of what they did like in the Bible. They would get engaged and the guy would leave.
That's right.
And then come back later or something like that. It's like you did the opposite. That's hilarious.
So we met in community and we were really fast friends. We met at our church through mutual friends and just connected right away. And I think one important piece to lead up to that is I had never dated anyone. And that was not because I was so holy. I never experienced anyone being interested in dating me. So I'm, all the way through college, watching people not only date, but get married. And I'm still have never understood any interest. I'm being careful with that language because maybe people were interested and I missed it with my own issues and whatnot, but I never understood it. It was never clear that clear. No one was really clear. So when I met him,
said, will you go out with me?
Yeah, no one was like, oh, I get what you're asking. It was never like that. So, so when I met him and we were such fast friends, I had for a time carried a belief that I was undesirable. Nobody wanted me. I'm just kind of one of the guys when I do have friends. And so for someone to show interest in me was very new and exciting. And there had been some injury in friendships before, like not even romantic relationships, but rejections from friends. Mm-hmm. And so this just felt like, oh, maybe there is something good in me. Maybe this person sees something and likes what they see. And that, who isn't like kind of attracted to that? But I just still didn't have the maturity or the health to catch red flags, really even in myself first, but also in the dynamics of the relationship, which they were there from the beginning,
Yeah, but then in your first year of marriage, something happened. What happened that first year you were married?
Oh man, so 4 days before our first wedding anniversary, while we were living in his parents' house, because they were moving to Colombia, where his father was from, to retire. And we were transitioning into their house as they transitioned out. And so one morning, 4 days before our first wedding anniversary, we woke up to the murder of my mother-in-law by my father-in-law while he was in some kind of psychotic blackout. So he didn't have, and he came and woke us up. Like he walked down the hall from the mother-in-law suite and woke us up. And somewhere in that space of hallway, like came to enough. He was able to call the police on his own. So we woke up to the ambulance already at our door. And we were leaving that day for a 10-day mission trip. So
how convenient.
We didn't leave, but yeah.
I mean, I would feel like I would want to leave.
Oh man. I remember sitting there on the curb in my front yard in my pajamas in shock as things were unfolding and thinking.
You said that he was in a blackout fugue of some sort. I mean, he could have continued.
He could have. And once he came to, he still wasn't totally of his right mind. Wow. There were still clearly some things that were off. Like we didn't know for sure in the moment what had happened. It became clear with some time and evidence and whatnot. Well, gosh, even that morning, I mean, I won't get too graphic, but there was evidence on him that once we were outside in the sun, we could see like, okay, well, he was close enough to her murder that he should at least remember that. And he didn't. So, but I remember sitting there on the curb thinking, is this going to be done in time for us to catch our flight? Like the brain in shock, right? Like that was what was on my mind. I was like, is this going to take a while? Because we have a flight to catch. You know,
it's not something you like want to plan. Oh, how would you like to spend your Saturday morning? Oh, I would like to spend it being interrogated by the police for a murder that happened in my house. No, you don't do that. Your mind is going,
it couldn't even.
Peace out. Peace out.
I have a flight to catch. I'm a good runner. Yeah. So, and actually I have a Tedx talk that addresses that exact situation and talks about some of the things I learned about it and just perception, how our brains can be like, my husband and I were in the same story, but my brain was like, oh my gosh, when you're asleep, people could walk around your house and kill your loved ones. And it disrupted my sleep for a long time. You know,
I can imagine that.
His brain more was able to interpret like, wow, that was a weird fluke, horrible thing, but it was like a one of a kind thing. I can still sleep peacefully. And so I just talk about how the brain on survival, it just depends on the perception that it's agreeing with it. So I have a TEDx talk, and then I wrote a book, and he partnered with it. He contributed a chapter and some pieces, and the news articles are in it as well, called While We Slept, Finding Hope and Healing After Homicide. Because it was my way of processing like what happened. And then we got asked a number of times from the journalists who became regular in our home for the next 3 years, like, how are you okay? I just interviewed this guy over here and then he killed himself after I left, and you are functioning. Like, how are you okay?
Yeah. How did it affect you in the time that, well, you said you couldn't sleep for a long time?
I had to lock the doors. Like I had to just lock everything to feel safe. It was really confusing. It was how I met the rest of his family. I had never met the wholeness of his family, and that brought everything together. So it was through these really interesting circumstances. And then there were times where my discernment and intuition was just different from where everyone else thought we were going. And so then sometimes I was at odds. So for example, there was a moment where 3 things were missing from the house that were significant: some rings, a computer, and something else. And I had this dream, and I will sometimes have prophetic dreams, but I had a dream that Marianne told me that all the things were in the house.
Who's Marianne?
That was my mother-in-law. Yeah, thanks. Okay. My mother-in-law who passed away was in my dream and telling me that all the things were in the house. And I woke up with such assurance that they were. But the other family members and some of the lawyers were using that as like, oh, maybe he didn't kill her. Maybe someone came in and stole the things, killed her, and he just missed the whole thing, like why he was covered. And I was like, I really think that God is saying they're here. And so one of the aunts came. And we had searched everywhere, like as much as I could, but one of the aunts came, and within an hour of her looking around, she found all 3 things.
Wow.
But for a time I was at odds with a big group of the people, just like with this assurance, like, no, I don't think someone came in and stole them. I believe we're going to find them. And we all just need to like keep moving forward with the reality that we're facing and not get off on these rabbit trails. I understand needing to make sure I'm not trying to say don't do a good and thorough job in an investigation, for sure. But there was just a lot of other evidence I knew. So yeah, it was just a really tricky time to be alive and be newly married. And
wow. Yeah. But then you spent 9 years in Germany. How did that come about, and what happened there?
Yeah. So a few years later, we began to foster children. We adopted a couple children. I had never been good with having roots because we moved so much as a kid. So the idea of like staying planted was hard, but okay, we'll have kids and we'll get connected with our church and whatnot. But I always just had this heart for the world. Like I have a wanderlust, and I love culture and language and people. And then our pastors at our church at the time said, hey, we were missionaries in Italy and we had our kids attend this school, and you guys would be the perfect fit for staff at that school. It's a missionary school in the sense that all of the staff raise their own funding to be able to serve there, so that families whose kids attend can afford it, because all missionaries who need schooling are on a kind of fundraised budget, whatever. So long story short, that door opened wide for us, and we were able to go. We took our 3 and 4-year-olds, birth children, I think our older kids are like 10 and 11, our adopted kids, to Germany and raised them there for those 9 years. And man, I miss it. I miss Europe. We've been back just over a year now, just over.
Wow. But more things happened in Germany, didn't they? And
Yeah.
wonderful raising of children. Isn't that where some things unfolded in your marriage?
Yeah. So our older children that were adopted through foster care were children of trauma. They came from horrific backgrounds that no kid should ever have to experience. And as a result, their brains had rewired to adjust to that. Like I've written books on that too. Parenting Children of Trauma and Reclaiming Hope are books I've written for foster and adoptive families. But my experience with it firsthand was like, I came in with a therapeutic background. I'd worked in social services. My degrees are in therapy. I had all these tools and they were not working. Like I was burning through my toolbox and these kids were not healing or getting any better. And at that time, I still had worth issues, right? Like my worth and value were still connected to how much I could keep this husband happy and appeased, and then how much these kids healed. Like God's unconditional love should heal them, and I'm the conduit. So if they're not getting healed, it's not his love, it's not them, it's me. So there was so much pressure on me all the time to remain a person who had any value or worth through my effort, which was constantly failing. Right.
Wow.
There's there's some people you can't keep happy and you can't heal. I have no power to heal anyone, but I really thought I could, and I think a lot of foster families go in with that mentality, like, oh, God's unconditional love, it's gonna heal them. And it's a journey. It's not that simple. So in our years there of raising them and pouring, I burned out. And ended up needing some like counseling help, some medicinal help to just stay awake. Like I slept for like a year and a half, and yet I still had younger kids who needed attention. And I was like, my older kids are so exhausting in their own way that I have to preserve a lot of energy for when they get home from school. And I remember when I started that medication going, oh, I needed this a long time ago, and it helps in my marriage too. Like I'm way less sort of reactive to some of the dynamics in the marriage. I remember having that thought. So as time went on a bit, those kids turned 18, moved on, had just the younger two, and we kind of had a fresh start to create a new like environment in our house, like a safe one. It hadn't been safe, emotionally safe, specifically, but all the safeties. And then what I want to say I realized, but I really didn't have a chance to fully understand it, was that now that they were gone, we could see the other issues far more clearly. Like things that I had always just labeled as difficulties because of raising these other two children. Well, now they're not in the picture, and there's still some of these dynamics in our marriage that are really hard.
How long were you in Germany at this point?
Gosh, well, I want to say like this was the whole time, but when our older kids moved out,
the older ones, they moved, and then you were starting kind of fresh. Where was that in your 9-year span?
2018, I think our last oldest child moved out. So we only had like our last 2 years, year and a half.
Okay.
In Germany with this like, oh, let's have like a toxic free environment now, and let's like, be able to invest our time and energy into these other two kids who I could potentially have grown up like I did, feeling like, oh gosh, there's a lot going on here, like I just need to be easy. And I was so aware of that from the beginning to try to always push against it, and like, nope, you get to be messy and you get to make mistakes and you get to learn from those. Like there's so much space here because you don't have to grow up like I did. But still, right, they experienced a home that was tumultuous in a lot of ways inside the home, not necessarily outside. So yeah, at this point, I will say that I knew my marriage was hard from before we married. I mean, I was crying on our honeymoon for some things, maybe lots of people do, I don't know. But coming up in the Christian faith, like I was taught that marriage is hard, and that's just that it's hard. And I had never had another marriage to compare it to. So I didn't know that my hard was abusive hard versus like everyday learning how to be two people in one river hard. So I just took all the things that came as what I'd signed up for.
Wow.
And
So
my
it's like you signed up for abuse
yeah,
without knowing you signed up for abuse.
yeah.
And you would tell me, like, what kind of abuse did you go through? Just briefly to, elaborate on that. What it was, verbal abuse, or what kind of abuse?
Yeah. So in the very beginning, there was a little bit of physical um, things that happened. Um, that wasn't the norm, but that was some of the very, very beginning before we had kids, really. And maybe right around after the first one was born. But mostly it was like covert. I don't want to, I know this is live and in lots of places, so I want to be careful. There was a cycle and a pattern of like attention and affection that felt really nice. And then something would happen where I inadvertently did something I didn't know, but his perception of it grew and grew, and he'd have to spend time processing it. And by the time he'd processed it, there was this narrative in his mind that had essentially turned me into a monster. And he's now like having to live with a monster and interacting with one. And so there'd be times where I was like, oh, that's not me. I don't know who you think I am, but whatever's happening, like, that's not me. And that would lead to periods of silence and not acknowledging my existence really at all. And then that would end in a rage, like an explosive rage where he finally had processed the things. I would poke at it early on, like, what did I, because I'm responsible for keeping him happy, so I have worth and value. So when he wasn't happy, I would get this real anxious energy, like, what do I do? What do I do? How do I fix it? What do you need? Right. And so when I would do that, when I would poke at, like, what do you need from me? What can I do? He would explode with all the things that he was still processing. So, and then we'd start over, loop. So then we'd go back to love bombing, like, oh my gosh, that wasn't really you. I'm so sorry. I guess I made some of that up. Like, you're the best. And we'd go round and round and round and round. And I didn't know what to call it. I know how to label it. We had marriage counseling for it. Man, looking back, I'm a little upset that this is such a classic, well-known pattern of behavior in certain kinds of relationships, and no one called it out. In fact, I don't have it right here with me, but one of our marriage counselings, maybe 2 years before the last and final rage that led us back to California, the counselor told me I had two options. So she spent time with both of us every day for like 8 days, and then individually as well.
Really? A counselor spent all day with you every day?
Not all day. No, just an hour a day.
Oh my goodness, you've been a counselor?
No, we were on a retreat for missionaries who'd experienced traumatic events, and we qualified just like in raising our kids. They're like, you
and then you
qualified.
had that murder in the house too. So
Yeah,
I mean,
we had a lot.
that is not related to your marriage
No.
itself. That's very separate. So
Right. I know. I don't want to take too much time trying to find it. I wanted to like just read what she said. I journaled at the time, but basically she gave me two options. And the options were that I could continue to stay in a relationship. No, I could, oh gosh, let me see if I can find it super fast. Cause here. Oh, maybe. And this
well, one of the things
okay.
Did you find it?
I did find it.
Okay.
So what she, and the only reason I'm sharing this and why it matters to me to get it right is because this makes me want to cry. Like, I'm a Christian woman in a church setting, and nobody was helping me. Nobody was helping us. There was so much fixation on a contract staying together, and there was no prioritizing of the health of the individuals under the contract. There was no accountability for how we honored the covenant relationship. And so looking back, I'm like, man, maybe our marriage could have been saved. I don't know. Well, no, I think it could have, because I am like the most loyal, committed, forgiving person to a fault, right? Like, there's still days where I'm like, all the things that have happened since, like, somehow I could still overcome it and say, let's just make it work, right? And the things since have been like bad, like, because I'm not there to pull him out in some ways of the narrative that comes up in his head about me. Like, he's just been able to stick in his story. And so it's just been bad, right? But so she told me at that time, one, I could keep exhausting myself trying to be worthy of his unreachable love. That was option one. Keep exhausting yourself trying to be worthy of his unreachable love. Or two, courageously live in the poopy space of roommate, waiting and hoping until he's processed what he needs to about life and can stop not fighting for our marriage. So this woman saw the situation I was in. She kind of named it like, these are your options. You can live as a roommate, waiting and hoping for one day for him to be willing to fight for the relationship, or keep exhausting yourself trying to be worthy of his unreachable love. And
unreachable then, love. I like how she put it that way. Unreachable
I know, but like,
love.
what about option three? Like, get safe and healthy and separate yourself from this behavior so that he can get safe and healthy. We did these 8 or 10 days there, and then she sent us off into the world together. And it was the worst month following that ever, because so many things had been brought to the surface, and then bye, and then
with really no help. It's like, you can be stuck in this situation this way, or you can be stuck in this situation this way.
And that's what I felt like I was groomed to already believe as a Christian woman. And so in the moment I was like, well, absolutely. I know these are my options. This is what I've been doing. Like, that's why we're here. That's why the problems. And so I didn't even feel upset about her advice at the time. But now that I've had so much awareness, so there was a final rage, and that rage sent me into a dissociative state, which means my body was like, my brain and body separated. They said, Marcy, we've given you a lot of years, 16 years, to try to be healthy here and to keep yourself safe, and you're not doing a great job. So we're going to send you to the Bahamas, and we're going to have someone come stand in for you. So I felt like the part of me that had always been really emotionally connected to that relationship was in the Bahamas. And I felt like now I was taking care of my sister's husband. Like, it was more like, oh, no, I'm just here to be a warm body. Like, we're not touching, we're not really talking, like, we're just. So that triggered for him the first time that the words abuse were used were actually from him in a letter he wrote to me, following up a lot of words that had come through in text and then out loud in front of the kids. There was a follow-up apology, and it was the first time where he said, in my prayer, and as I'm talking to God and he's giving me eyes to see, I recognize that my behavior has been abusive. And it was like, when I read that, I still hadn't come to that conclusion myself. I still hadn't. I just was taught that this is my responsibility. That was what I understood that my role as a Christian wife was to be, to keep everyone happy and placid and appeased. And if it wasn't working, it was something in me. I was always looking for the thing, like, what am I missing? Am I so broken? So that when he used those words in that letter, I was like, oh, man, they resonated. You're right. I think this is abusive. I haven't known to call it that. And then he pursued some help. For a time, he pursued help. I pursued help. I had no idea. I was still living in this really foggy, dissociative world. But that also kind of, I said foggy, but at the same time, that also gave me a clear head to make safe decisions for me. But I knew not long-term ones. I wasn't in any place to be making long-term decisions. But in his pursuit of help, he brought it to the awareness of our mission and people in the community. And so then it became bigger. Then it became like an agency thing. And once they tried genuinely to be supportive, but they had no education or understanding around our situation, so they perpetuated harm unintentionally.
How did they do that? What did they do to perpetuate harm?
Yeah, well, they it's a good question. I have to take myself back to there were so many meetings that happened, but basically it was like, we want you guys to do a live-in separation. Like, we don't do other kinds of separation because that doesn't look good for us.
Because it doesn't look good.
Yeah, no.
That's just not. No, this is a Christian situation. It doesn't look good. So let's focus on what it looks. But then Jesus talked about the whitewashed sepulchres.
Yeah. And, I'm in a mission community. Like, we want to keep this kind of controlled and contained. And so their initial response was to send us for 4 days of 5 hours a day of intensive couples therapy in a neighboring country with the same counselor who had given me these options, and then sent us out into the world. And the thing is, like, now I know that when you're working with someone who's coming from that kind of abuse, verbal, emotional, psychological, financial, spiritual, the first thing needs to be to create a sense of safety, and then help and accountability for the other person, to put them. So it was kind of like they were asking me of this. When I heard them suggest that, I was like, so let's say that I'm in here right now with a broken rib, a bloody face, broken arm. I'm in here beaten and battered. And your suggestion is that I should go with my batterer for 5 hours a day for 4 straight days for couples counseling. Like, you can't see it because it's my soul that's coming in here broken and bleeding. But the suggestion shouldn't be any different. Like, why would you, when someone is coming in with both people saying there's been abuse and it's ongoing, even though the one is trying, force me into a situation like that? That is not safe. That is not caring.
No, not good at all.
And I was like, and then what is your hope? What do you hope will happen at the end of those 20 hours of intent? Like, that will come back like, okay, we're fine. He doesn't abuse anymore and I'm not codependent anymore. And we're like, what's the end goal of that kind of intensive work? And so I was drowning, but having to coach them at the same time on how to save me. And it was exhausting. I'm a mother with children who've been watching and experiencing this the whole time, like the abuse too, right? It happened in our house in front of everybody.
Wow.
So that kind of stuff. Or I had an upcoming work trip that I had already planned. I was leaving a job that I was contracted with. I wanted to see everyone before I ended my time there. And they were like, oh, no, you can't, no, you have to be at home as much as possible right now. We want you home as much as possible right now. And again, like, okay. I had to keep saying like, okay, let's imagine I'm in here broken and bloody with wounds you can see. What would your suggest? I hope it would be to triage, like, get this woman to a hospital and get this man who says he loves Jesus and saying he wants to get better help. But the suggestions were always around how to keep our marriage contract intact. And I remember even one comment was, but Marcy, we have some concerns because when I see you, like, you're able to laugh and smile and you kind of look lighter, but he looks awful. He's kind of looking sickly and depressed, and I'm really worried about him. And I was like,
they're worried about the abuser. Oh, that's just
one final
classic in some situations.
Yeah.
Oh my.
No, and then another just quick. There's so many examples.
So how did you get out? How did you get out of there? What brought you out of that? Yeah. You said you were there for 16 years in the marriage.
Yeah.
How did you get out?
So I ended up going on that trip anyway, my work trip. I went and I said, no. Anyway, I went. And when I came back, it had been gone a while. I had been isolated. I was homesick. I was tired of all this. I started having panic attacks and other physical manifestations of stress and trauma that I'd never had. And by the time I got back to Germany, I had to quarantine. Now we're in the pandemic. I had to do, a government level quarantine, and then the school had their own quarantine system. And so I had to be separate it was supposed to be 5 days. And in my mind at that point, even though I had already decided, like, I need to choose my health, I need to listen to my body, I need to figure out safety, I need to stop coaching people while I'm drowning. Like, I still went back with like, I'm just going to try to make it work. It's easier. It's easier to live with abuse than to try to figure out how to live. I know that was a smile, but like behind it, I'm like, it's so dysfunctional.
I know, because it sounds insane, but people who have been through it, they understand, because there's a familiarity. There's a familiarity with the abuse. This is what you know. That's why some people never deal with their childhood trauma, because they don't think it's trauma, because that's all they know. It was normal to them. Yeah. And it's familiar to them, but it's like, and it takes work. It takes work.
I feel like my soul was dying, like, and I've used soul a few times, but it's like this inside part of me was dying. And yeah, it was like that had become the norm. And so I at least knew how to predict what was coming in the cycle. Like, I knew how to live without existing for a couple weeks at a time. I knew how to live through the rages that would come. I knew how to appreciate the love bombing while it was there. I knew the shifts and the movement of it. And so I had a pastor's wife recently tell me, that, well, yeah, it's always easier to leave. You're doing the easy thing. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? The easy thing is to stay, to maintain my status, my role, my financial security, my presentation to the world. That's easy. Being abused is easy. Getting out is not easy. So how did I? Was that I came back ready to sort of try it again. And he was very supportive in helping me get to my quarantine situation. But once I was in country and in quarantine, there was a huge flip in his understand, or not his understanding, in the way he was choosing to approach all of the situation. He decided that no, he had never been abusive. We weren't going to do any more separations. He'd always been God honoring in our relationship, that I had been abusive to the children to go on this work trip. And then there were some threats and some actions he was choosing to take. Like, he texted me on accident, one of them, instead of the person he intended. So I knew already also a plan he had for preventing me from some security and safety while I was there. And so our mission at that point was like, okay, when both people were on a path and had a shared understanding of the journey, and where we could manage it. But now that there's two, we have no idea. And at that point, I'm in a panic. I'm panicked. Like, I am maxed out on my survival skills and my resilience, everything maxed out. And so I was just like, how do I keep the kids and I safe? Like, how do I keep us safe? So they put us on a plane 4 weeks later. They put the kids and I on a plane. And then he followed a couple of days later back to California with the intention of us getting therapeutic help and then, saving our marriage. But essentially they dropped us off here. We had some transition pay to help us get going. But even that, like, I had the kids. The money was not divided according to like our actual situations. Right? And so even that, I'm like trying to survive and raise the kids and get them going and get our feet under us. They were raised there. They were 3 and 4. They had 4 weeks to say goodbye to their lives.
They were 3 and 4?
When we moved there. So 9 years later, like that, their childhoods were there. And because of the decisions of other people, they lost their home, their school, their friendships, the life that they knew. It's one thing, like, I could handle that for me, but to see how the decisions of other people impacted them to this day.
And this is still really fresh because this was like within the last year or so, right?
Yeah, it was just over a year ago. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So how did you go from survive to thrive through it all? What was it that really brought you out so that now you can tell your story? And I know you're still working through it, but you have made tremendous progress. There were a couple of things that you had mentioned of how you did that.
I would say early on, before I fully understood that anything was abuse, I began to grow in a sense of worth and value outside of what people could give me. And some of that came through some coaching work that I did with a dear, dear, dear friend who was also a coworker, Gary Williams of Better Future International. He's a coach for purpose and clarity and personality. And I went to him as a coworker who'd done trainings for us on Myers-Briggs and strength finders and all these different elements of self-understanding and other understanding. And so in my mind, I was like, this must be the problem in my marriage. He's an ENFP and I'm an INFP and I just don't know how to speak ENFP. Again, I was trying to like, I'm the deficit. This must be the thing. So I reached out to that coworker and I was like, how can an INFP love an ENFP better? Because clearly I'm missing the mark. It's so sad to think of like who I was, but I'm glad I've grown. So what he did though was show me. He showed me how I've been wired and designed, and I realized how much I had been like living, trying to be a hammer, banging things in when I was made to be a spoon. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not like defective. I'm just a spoon. I'm a banged up spoon from trying to put nails in the wall, but I'm a spoon and I can live that way. And so his coaching began to free me up to see how God has made me. And suddenly there was like space in the world for me to exist that way and not need other people to like keep reflecting back to me my value. In that coaching, he also taught me about mirrors and windows. And I had always lived thinking that everyone was holding up mirrors for me. And so I was constantly seeing these ugly images come back at me and thinking, how do I make that prettier, for everyone? And he was like, Marcy, the majority of those are windows. Even if someone thinks they're holding up a mirror, like they're just opening their windows so you can peek through into their experience. And you can see like, oh, look what it's like inside your little world over there. Like your worldview says that it's easy to leave an abusive marriage, and that's the easy thing out, and it means I don't trust God or believe in miracles, and like, oh, that's an interesting space you live in on that side of the window.
I really love that. I really love that, a window instead of a mirror, because your lack of self-value, everything was a mirror, and you were trying to be all these different things, and that's just insane.
Yeah. And I know that didn't originate with him, but it was something he introduced me to, and it like has radically changed. So being able to stop seeing the world as a reflection of me, which is so poor at doing, like only Jesus can be my reflection, right? Only his spirit can truly reflect me back to me. And that's mostly beautiful. There's definitely exhortation like, hey, but it's beautiful. It's tender. It's kind. It's his kindness that leads to repentance. Whereas it was everyone else's perceptions of me, or my perceptions of their perceptions of me, that kept me chained down. So early on, I began on this journey of beginning to find like some God confidence and worth and value. And then I began to feel less tolerant of being treated poorly, but I hadn't had a chance to act on it. I was still on that journey. So that was one. And I've continued on that path. So like from surviving to thriving has 100% involved growing in how I understand my own wiring, the places where I just know that I'm weak and I need the body of Christ to step into that spot, and the places where I know I'm strong and I can step in and be a support and strength to someone else. Like I love the body of Christ. I love that we all need us, and I don't have to be all of the things because I can't. So that's been radically transforming for me. Also, healthy community. For the first time in my life, I have the healthiest relationships I have ever had because of that self-awareness. I'm able to show up now to my friendships and just love them without any expectation of like, so did I do good enough? Do you like me now? Like there's none of that anxious energy that was there. If I want to bring someone soup, I bring them soup, and I don't need anything back. They could never talk to me again. I mean, I have feelings. I'd be sad if I lost friendships, but like there's not this energy of needing that back. So I have such a supportive, beautiful, healthy community who have journeyed with me, believed me, agreed with me around the priority of my health and safety and wholeness, my journey with Jesus continuing. So community, self and others awareness. And then, I mean, my one and only tattoo I did just before my Tedx talk, it's the anchor. And my word that year was anchor, because you can't see it, but I have this hope as an anchor for my soul, a sure and steady anchor. And I just feel like I have like clung to the anchor, like the stormy seas can be raging, and I'm like, I'm hanging on. And I mean, Jesus, like I have a sign up in my house too that says just Jesus. Like there's just days where it's like, your grace is so good. You let the hard things happen, but then he swoops in with all of this tenderness and care and provision and even awareness around why some of the hard things happen, right? Some of them right now are playing into a long game of freedom that will come for me later. And I just have to like trust him and be patient and endure in the meantime. So I know it's a bit of a long answer, but summed up: Jesus, community, and like knowing my value and worth as I've come to understand God's design for me.
And you'd mentioned your voice too, speaking up for yourself, but you're doing that in your community, speaking up for yourself, and you spoke up by taking ownership of your value and reaching out for help and not being afraid to do that. So that's awesome. Well, you're a story coach. What is that? Briefly share with the audience, what is a story coach, and why would anyone want a story coach?
I mean, so I began writing and speaking really as my own source of processing. There's a great quote by Flannery O'Connor, an author. It's something to the effect of, I write so that when I read what I've written, I understand what I'm thinking. And that has resonated with me forever. Like, that's it. I have to get everything on a page, and then I read it and I'm like, oh, that's right. Oh, and then I'm like, wow, would this help anyone else? And so many of the books I've written, there's 18 and counting have been kind of that, like, hey, anyone else like think this is hard, or anyone else need hope in overcoming, things like murders, like anyone else? And so
Anyone need help overcoming things like murder? I mean, that's not an everyday thing people say, but there are people in there. In my book, Because You Matter, one of the gentlemen in there that I interviewed, he lost his best friend who was murdered in a carjacking. So
it's amazing how many conversations have started as a result of that piece of my story.
I can imagine.
I've had people say, like, I've never told anyone this, but my brother was murdered, or this, or like, there's so much. It's just the world. And I'm homesick for heaven. So a story coach. So at this point, I've been a storyteller by default, by nature, by the way God designed me to process my own world. But then I've also had a lot of training in storytelling. But because I'm also a therapist and I'm a trauma and resilience certified practitioner, I have all this understanding of the brain that just geeks me out. I have another TEDx talk that's on the brain and story, like the unique way that our brains light up when we hear a story. And so now I feel there's a stewardship of our stories when we tell it. If we know we can have a level of impact on someone's physiological experience, then I want to do that really well. And especially as believers, I mean, I work with everybody. So story coaching means that I help people develop their story, whether it's for a book, whether it's for a stage, whatever it's for, to embed story into what they're doing, to know their stories, to have a story bank, to have their, whatever it might be. I work a lot with authors. I have a publishing press too, where I offer publishing services, book production services. So ultimately I feel called not only to be a lighthouse where I've been planted, but to help others light their lighthouses so they can shine where they've been planted, and to do that in community. So there's a lot of things I do to remove obstacles from people who feel called to put their story into the world. And one of the ways is story coaching, where I bring like my brain science and story elements and say, how do we create and craft an engaging, impactful story that actually lights up a person's body and gives them, we can actually build resilience and life experience into people while they're sitting in a chair in front of us, or sitting with their book in their lap, or hearing it come through their audio, however they're getting it. So that's what I do. I partner with people who want to get their message or their work into the world. I've got some people who are just like data minded, number minded, and they're like, I can give all the facts all day and everyone falls asleep. Like, how do I embed story into that so that I can be impactful? So that's what I do. I help people understand how the brain works, and then to be really good stewards of their own stories.
Well, that's awesome. Well, you are, I mentioned to my audience, you are a prolific writer, which means you have written a lot. I think you mentioned 18 books.
Yeah.
Wow. Tell us something about your book, or hold up a couple of them, and then tell us the name of them. I mean, 18 might be a lot to do that.
So. 5 different children's books, and some of these are also in other languages. So there's some in German, some in Spanish. But Hercules was one of my first ones. It's about a Herculean turkey chick. He was born with Herculean strength, and he has to find his place in the world. It's one of my first ones. It's a fan favorite. We've got Speranza Sweater. This is a foster adopt story, and it's one of the only ones out there that does what it does, and it's been a real help to a lot of families. I'm trying to do these in the right order. Okay, According to Corbin is a fun imagination story, and it has a sequel. So these are just really fun imaginative stories. You get to go into the imagination of a kid and see what's happening in real life, but how they are actually experiencing their world. So it's kind of this fun dichotomy between what the mom might be experiencing as far as like the messy house, but what the kid sees when he looks at the messy house. And then Weirdo and Willie is a story based on a childhood experience I had with some bullying, and I turned it into a really fun story for kids to also find their own worth outside of other people. It's exactly what that book's about.
So important.
So important. Forever Homes is my first attempt at a YA novel. It was a story that wouldn't go away. It also has a foster adopt theme. My daughter loves it, and that's all that matters. Actually, I should say a lot of these are award winning and have been best selling too. So that's just a fun little like vanity thing I'll drop. While We Slept. So this is the one on the.
What is the subtitle?
Finding Hope and Healing After Homicide.
Wow.
And that's my in-laws there on the nightstand. I just love the cover. And then it's got both of us. My fun little filter isn't fun when I'm trying to show books. This is less. This is about a year social experiment we did of not buying anything new to see if you can live in America on everyone else's tossed away things. You can. Spoiler alert, you can live in America and not buy anything new. We bought toilet paper, so let's not get weird there, but.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Don't want to use toilet paper. Thank you for clearing that up.
And community. I started actually one of the first buy and sell groups that existed on Facebook before it was a thing. I just opened up a group, it took off, and now they have the whole marketplace. Like, not necessarily because of me, but I had a buy and sell group on there before I ever saw any other buy and sell groups. And then it took off. Other groups started popping up in different places because they heard of mine. And so some of that I talk about in the book too. Reclaiming Hope is finding or overcoming the challenges of parenting foster and adopted children. It was my attempt to bring some real conversation to the community, because we often just see blended families smiling, running through fields of wildflowers, and that is fostering. And then in my own world, I was like, what is wrong with us? Like, that is not the picture. And so it was like, anyone else think this is just hard? And then how do we acknowledge that it's hard, but then not just gripe about it, but like, that's overcoming the challenges. Like, how do we reclaim hope when what we see is so different from what we're experiencing? And so that's that one. And then Parenting Children of Trauma is kind of a follow-up, but I get a little more into attachment and personality disorders, and then a lot of strategies, because it's a kind of upside down parenting with kids whose brains have been rewired as a result of trauma to parent them. So this is like, I don't even have to really promote or market this one very much. It sells itself at this point because it's been so helpful, which is a gift to me, because I kept saying no to writing it. I felt God calling me to write it. And I was like, nope, I can't fix anyone's problems. This is a long road. I don't have the answer. And then a friend said to me, Marcy, we read your books because you remove shame, not because you solve all of our problems. And as soon as she said that, I was like, oh,
remove shame. I'm going to pause there right there for our listeners. Removing shame. Removing shame is huge. It is so important. I love that you said that. Removing shame. I'm all about removing shame.
And I could write that story. I can't write the stories that are going to solve the world for anybody, or make their kid not have trauma, or erase the murder or the hard thing that someone is overcoming. But I can come along as a friend, as a sister, and say, you're not alone. You're not alone. This is hard. It's hard for everybody. It's just that we haven't talked about it. It's okay to have all the feelings. Like Speranza's Sweater, that foster adopt children's book, is about permission to have all the feelings. And that's what, even as Christ followers, we're called to do with our stories. Psalm 107:2 says, let the redeemed of the Lord tell their stories. And he goes from like scenario to scenario to scenario, and then that refrain repeats. And so our job is, man, if we can show up and remove shame from people's lives just by sharing our story, that's that stewardship element again. Like, you don't have to be an expert at anything. You don't have to have figured it all out. You can talk about depression while you're still dealing with it, and be helpful and inspiring and encouraging to someone else. And you're going to heal at the same time, because that's how yeah.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for being with us today. How can people connect with you? Where can they find you online?
So marcypusey.com is a great starting point. I'm also on Instagram at Marcy Marie. If you go to my website, marcypusey.com, there's a free guide that pops up around how to use storytelling for healing, like some of your own healing process and journey as well.
Awesome.
And then for anyone who's felt like they could use support, I have a Facebook group that's free. It's called Reclaiming Hope. You are more than your traumatic event or traumatic experiences. You are more than your trauma. It's something like that. And it's just a support space. It's a free support space for people to come together and have a safe and healthy way of processing. But then I also periodically, inconsistently, but periodically will share tips or strategies in lives, just to give people some encouragement and some actual things that they can do to keep healing. We're just going to heal till heaven. So
that's awesome. Well, thank you for being with us today. I really appreciate you sharing and opening your heart, and we just got into it, and I just enjoyed it so much. Thank you.
Yeah, I know we went way over, but thanks for
Oh, no, it was good. It was good. It's why it's a conversation. We have a conversation. We share this. If it's too long for some people, they can pause and come back another time. So
Perfect. Well, thank you again. I don't take it lightly. I'm so grateful that you've used your platform to put stories out into the world. You're doing it. You're story coaching without even knowing it by creating opportunity. Yeah, it's such a great opportunity. But yeah, so just cheers to you, and then thank you for sharing that with me and letting me join you.
Sure. I'll talk to you in a couple minutes, right?
Okay.
Well, thank you for being with us today. That was delightful talking with Marcy. We knew it might go longer today because she has so much to share. And there was so much more we could get into. So I encourage you, if you are curious about her story more, go and buy her books. Go to her website, marcypusey.com. M-A-R-C, I gotta check it, CYPUSEY.com. And check out what she has to offer and get what you need, because that's why I'm here. Danielle Burnock, that lady on the internet who loves you so that you get what you need. I want to share Marcy's story, but I share it because you need it. If you've gotten this far in the story, you have enjoyed this and it has served you. And I thank you for being with us today. So until next time, I love you.